Happy 4th of July and welcome to another CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I may put a few extra tidbits and details I don't cover here on the show tonight. And while you're there, make sure you check out all the other articles and check out all the shows we have here on the channel. Make sure you tell us what you think in the comments down below, that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's list, don't worry. I actually had to do this one a little bit early and record this Thursday night because I do have plans for the 4th of July holiday, but I will not miss a show and I will get this out to you every week at 9 p.m. on Friday. So I had to do this one a little bit early. So if the data's a little bit short, that is what it is. But still, we have plenty to talk about this week. And if you want to see this week's list, just hang on for a few seconds after the intro and I will be right back.
Notable sales.
All right, so for notable sales, I did consider to do something kind of topical for 4th of July, do some sort of patriotic sort of selections, but I figure you guys are probably getting enough of that this weekend from everywhere else, so I decided to just jump at the things that stood out to me. And surprisingly, this week, I just made a post because it came up in my reminder feed that 5 years ago, I purchased this book raw, and this week we saw a big sale of Space Vixens. I know most people call this book Space Vixens, but it's actually called 3D Zone number 16. It was, sort of like a different series, but Space Vixens was the Dave Stevens storyline that we're focusing on here and the Dave Stevens cover, which is why this book is pretty popular. But this is, again, 3D Zone number 16. There are two different versions of this one. This is the second version that may be a little bit harder to find, where there is no extra title and details on the front. You do see the 250, but on the other version, you will see some black text at the top of the page that isn't there on this one. With that said, this week we saw a CGC 9.8 sell for a whopping $1,700. Granted, this sold last August in 2024 for $1,325. So that is a nice jump from that last 9.8 sale, but it is far from the all-time high, which you have to go back until December of 2023, where this thing actually sold for over $4,000. Crazy times. You guys remember the Dave Stevens train? Well, it was chugging along strong a couple of years ago, and now it's still going well, and people are still looking for his covers. I'm still a big fan. I think I have most of them, if not all of them at this point, but this is one of the more popular ones, and if you can get a high-grade one, these are some big prices. Now, on this topic, and kind of sticking with one of my other favorite artists, just kind of keeping it topical for me, I decided to go with an Adam Hughes book here, because I haven't seen Hughes do anything that I've jumped on board for in a while now. Like, he's done some covers, but nothing that really stood out like this book did a few years ago. This is Pop Kill number 4 for Paper Films. This was part of the Pop Kill Kickstarter project, and you had to actually order this ahead of time. Not a lot of these out there. Great cover. I'm a big fan of this cover. 9.8 sold for a pretty big number this week as well. So again, this is issue 4 of Pop Kill. Adam Hughes cover. A CGC 9.8 sold this week for $1,200. Why is that important? Well, just last month, a 9.8 only sold for $570. It's more than doubled in a month. Why? I don't know, but it did. This was actually a best offer on a $1,300 ask, but $1,200 for a 9.8. Again, not an all-time high. For that, you got to go back to 2022, where an offer was accepted for $1,900 on this, which I think is the high watermark that we have for this particular book in a 9.8. With that said, it's still a tough book to find. It's still a gorgeous cover, and I'm happy I do actually have this book in my collection as well. And with that, we're going to get on to the top 10. But before we do, speaking of 10, save yourselves 10% off your entire order over at BCW by using my code RENNA10. Get your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, your CGC boxes, your top loaders, pages for cards, etc. Basically, BCW has anything to keep your comics or collectibles safe. And if you got to buy these supplies anyway, you might as well save some money while you do. So save 10% off your entire order by using my code RENNA10 right there. Now, with that said, let's get right into the top 10 list with our first book.
Number 10.
Okay, so rumors that Ma Nucci is going to be the villain in this Punisher special that we are getting. With that, her first appearance is in Punisher number 4 from that Garth Ennis run with Dylan. Bradstreet covers. This is a great run. If you haven't read it or found these, they are all pretty cheap right now. You can see that this book actually went from being $1 or $2 to going for like $10 this week because of this rumor and news that she's going to be the villain. You know, that's what happens when we get that kind of news and that sort of announcement. This is Punisher number 4. Again, that Tim Bradstreet cover. Already this week, based off of that news, we've already seen 20 plus sales with a high of $10. Granted, most of the sales for much less than that. We're talking only $4 to $5 at an average, but those higher sales are starting to come as more people, as the cheap copies clear out and more people are looking for this book. I'm telling you, go dig in a box because these are out there. And again, I have to do this show early, so I'm not getting as much volume as I might hope for, as I usually do by Friday, but we still got a good chunk and a good representation to give us something to go on for this week. So here at number 10, we have Punisher number 4. With that, let's keep it rolling and get to our next book.
Number 9.
And holding strong at number 9, we have that Hyde Street number 7, that 1 in 20 incentive, the Dr. Jelly and Mr. Peanut Butter cover. That is an homage to the old, Count Chocula, Frankenberry type cereal boxes. This is a fun set that they're going to be doing for these incentives going forward for a couple of books. So go and collect them if you can. But it's getting tougher as this book is holding at number 9 because we've only had about a dozen sales again, just like last week, which isn't a ton of volume, but it's a decent amount for an incentive. It's the prices, as the prices have gone up 47% to an average of $53 now for this 1 in 20, with a high now hitting $65, which is a 30% increase from last week's high. So for a 1 in 20, these are doing well at double, triple ratio. So if you can find them, good luck getting them at a good price. I think it's a fun cover. I didn't get one, unfortunately, but maybe if the price comes down, I'll think about it down the road. But here we have it, holding at number 9 with those increase in prices. Now, with that said, let's keep it rolling to number 8.
Number 8.
And claiming our number 8 spot, this is an all-time favorite of mine, as you might guess, as you might know. I am a big G.I. Joe fan, so G.I. Joe number 1. Rumors of an animated series of G.I. Joe Transformers coming soon. We have a strong showing on 2 G.I. Joe comics running concurrently through Skybound right now. With all of that and possible other features and things coming our way, G.I. Joe is doing well these days. Our original G.I. Joe number 1, though, seen a bit of a bump this week, as I said, with almost 20 sold, which is a 54% increase from last week's sales, while raw highs are hitting $125, which is not far off of where this has been for the last couple of years, generally around $100. So hitting those highs of 125 is kind of nice. And a CGC 9.8 sold this week for almost $1,000 at $990. There was another like CGC Signature Series sale recently, but this is just the blue label 9.8 that went for $990. Some people look for the newsstand, some people like the direct. Honestly, at this time in 1982, don't think that newsstands were more rare because it might have actually been flip-flopped at this point. You have to go back to check the data, but don't always just assume that newsstands were more rare because that wasn't always the case. With that said, that was our number 8 book, so let's take a look at lucky number 7.
Number 7.
More 80s nostalgia for you as we got some teases of the new He-Man film coming. We've got some actors teasing some pictures and some set photos, etc., as we are getting a He-Man Masters of the Universe movie once again. So here we have number 1 from the DC series. This is the early 80s one, not the later series that came, in 1986. This is the original run. Granted, not the first appearance because that will be a convoluted conversation, whether we want to go to DC Presents or the mini comic that came with the figures. I don't want to go there. Point being, a lot of folks are going back to the first mini series from DC here with this number 1. And this book is doing quite well. Again, here it is. This is Masters of the Universe number 1 with the George Tuska cover, where the action is nearly 30 sales this week, which is up 62% from last week. We've got raw averaging around $35, with a CGC 9.8 selling for $275 this week, which is a 31% jump from last week's sale of just over $200, I think. So increases in prices, increases in volumes for He-Man this week as folks are starting to get excited. Again, I wouldn't call this the first appearance of He-Man, but this is an important book in his run, part of the first mini. So a lot of folks getting it, also because it's one of the more affordable books that you can get for He-Man in those days. Now, with that said, let's keep the list going and check out number 6.
Number 6.
Speaking of potential first, well, we do have an early He-Man appearance in comic book form. A lot of people look at this as the first because it is in comic book form. Again, not looking at the mini comics. I'm not going to debate that. If you want to know what is which, go and do some research on it. But a lot of folks are picking up this one as well. Number 47, DC Comics presents for their He-Man first. And this one has been expensive for a little while now. Not super duper expensive. Not like the Silver Age stuff we've been seeing lately with Silver Surfer 3 and even like more of the Bronze stuff when we're getting like Punisher first appearances lately. But still pricier than, say, that Punisher 4, which is hitting highs at $10. This one had about a dozen sold this week, which is a 140% increase on this particular book, with a raw averaging $150 this past week, with like half a dozen sales in the raw range. Bunch of graded sales as well. This sells in all grades, but raw is averaging 150, which is a 34% jump from last week's averages, with the high hitting 250 in raw. 88% jump from last week's high sale for a raw. So this book, despite not having a huge amount of volume, but like I said, I had a shorter window to run with, having to do this on Thursday, but it is tracking in the upwards direction with those prices and the volume, as DC Comics presents number 47 is the popular pick for He-Man's first appearance in comics. Once again, don't forget the mini comic that came with the figures back in the day. But that's a different story for us to discuss another day. We still have the top half of the list coming up, so let's take a look and see what we got.
Number 5.
Holding on to the list, but dropping a few spots, we still have that indie book that's been optioned, The Ghost Fleet. We have early Donny Cates, Daniel Warren Johnson working together, The Ghost Fleet being adapted, and it's still doing well, despite the fact that it has dropped a few spots here on our list. With that said, everything is up. Everything is up for this book from last week, but it's still fallen down a few spots because it's not up a ton, with about 30 sold, which is a 25% increase from volume of last week, averaging about $16, a 60% jump from last week, hitting a high of $32, which is a slight bump of 14% from last week's high. So once again, not huge increases, well, except maybe the average being $16 from what was $10 last week, but still, those little gains still keep it here on the list, but don't keep it from staying near the top. So it did fall a couple of spots, but still doing well if you can track one of these down in those back issue bins at your shop. So with that said, let's keep it rolling and check out our next book at number 4.
Number 4.
At number 4, it's probably my favorite cover of the week. You guys, again, G.I. Joe fan. Storm Shadow on this cover of G.I. Joe Real American Hero, number 318. Larry Hama's still running through with this series. This is the 1 in 10 incentive that they've been doing, these awesome camouflage negative space covers. A couple of them have hit along the way, like the Scarlet, the Cobra Commander did well. There was a Snake Eyes. There was a Stalker. A lot of great covers that have come through this run by Francis Portella. 1 in 10 on this 318. Now, with that 1 in 10 ratio, it's been doing quite well as far as pricing goes, with only a day or so on the market, with nearly 20 sold, averaging $28, already hitting highs of $40 this week, and it's only been on the shelves for about a day or so. So, decent returns if you were able to pick one of these up. Again, that bright white cover hits. I like it. It's one of my favorites of the week, and I'm not surprised it's doing well. I'm surprised it's doing as well as it is, but not surprised that it is doing above that ratio mark. I would have figured this for like $20, but it's at 28, hitting highs of 40. Who knows if that's the ceiling, but we'll keep an eye on in the week ahead. But this is our number 4 book with 3 more to go, so let's not waste any time, and let's see what they are.
Number 3.
At number 3, we've got some 90s nostalgia for you now as we shift to The Predator. Yeah, The Predator is hitting on all cylinders right now. We got a new movie on the way. An animated movie just hit a few weeks ago. Predator's got all sorts of Marvel crossovers right now, with a decent storyline with Spidey wrapping up, and then Predator coming to kill the entire Marvel universe in a couple of months, as I think that book just hit FOC recently. So Predator number 1 from Dark Horse is seeing some gains again, as it has in the past, coming back around on that spec cycle once again. With that, how much gains? Let's see. We've got over 20 sales this week, which is a 50% jump from last week. Raw is averaging $75 again, which is a 32% jump. And the raw high hitting $115, which is a huge 67% jump this week. So up across the board in volume and prices. As I said, Predator is rolling strong with movies and TV and streaming movies and comics on the way. You can't get enough Predator, or at least I can't get enough Predator right now. So happy to see this back in the spotlight here at number 3. So with that said, 2 more books to go. Let's see what we got.
Number 2.
All right, this book was actually released last week. This is Mark Spears' Monsters number 5, which actually came out even before that. But with the change of Keenspot through distributors, some books were getting distributed here or there and through Lunar, etc. So some delays on some of these books, including this issue 5, which is actually a book that's polybagged with one of 4 different cards. Yeah, remember that? Remember the old school X-Force days where you had to get all the different cards that were different polybagged in there? Well, that's what the nostalgia we're capturing here once again from the 90s with this 90s throwback cover, which is a New Mutants 98 homage done by Mark Spears on this issue 5. But again, this is that polybagged with the card version. 4 different cards, 4 different versions, doing quite well with over 30 sold this past week or so. Again, this came out last Wednesday, so we're looking at about 8-9 days worth of volume, which would probably take us more into the 50-60 range in total. But highs are now hitting $15. Plenty of still sales in that $5 to $8 kind of range, just a couple of bucks, maybe over cover. But we're starting to see more of those $10 to $15 sales as the week starts rolling on, as I guess people are chasing and completing these sets, as sets of the 4 different cards are going for about $50. You also might see sets listed selling all the different number 5 covers, but don't forget this particular cover has 4 different cards with it. So to be a completionist, that's like 9 different covers you're going to have to buy for this number 5. A lot of covers on the Mark Spears books these days. We all know that. A lot of exclusives too. But I will say the cards are a fun little touch. It is a fun little bit of nostalgia to go back and try to chase all those cards. And for now, it's not that expensive, though prices are starting to tick on their way up. So with that, this is our number 2 book of the week, which leaves us with 1 left. So let's see what we got.
And our number 1.
And here, hanging on once again to that top spot, we are looking at Street Fighter number 1. Now, why is this here again? Well, even more news has been coming out this past week since last week's news. I mean, yes, we had the Roman Reigns, Jason Momoa confirmations after months of rumors that they were going to be in this film. But since then, I believe we've also got confirmed that 50 Cent is playing Balrog, and I think David Dashmillion is playing M. Bison, and more recent rumors this week have Cody Rhodes possibly joining as Guile. I don't know if that's confirmed as of yet, but that was the hot rumor the last couple of days. 2 WWE superstars in this film. Big names could make this even more interesting than it already is for me. And again, more 90s nostalgia hitting us this week with Street Fighter number 1. And this was number 1 last week, and it's number 1 again because we've seen a huge jump in volume for this particular book, with nearly 70 sold the past week or so since last week, which is a 150% jump in volumes, with Raw still averaging about $15 because you can still get your cheap copies out there, a little $5 here, $8 there, but averaging about $15 with highs hitting $30 Raw. With that, don't forget, there is a gold foil version of this book that's limited to like 18,000 copies. Well, that gold foil one's going for about 30 to 35, and I think that one even hit a high of 65. So you got a handful of those mixed in as well with these regular cover sales, and a 9.8 sold this week for $164, which is actually a 31% jump from last week's 9.8 sale. So all things to keep an eye on as we see even more confirmation and more news, and even when this movie eventually comes out like a year or so from now. So all things Street Fighter are kind of popping right now, and it's kind of fun and interesting to see. A lot of nostalgia this week on the list. Hopefully you found this entertaining. Let me know what you think in the comments down below as I wrap this up for this week. Happy 4th of July to all of you. The Qualified is not coming up next. The boys are taking the week off for the holiday. They will be back next week, but we are going to wish you a happy 4th of July. Enjoy some time with family and friends. Be careful with those fireworks. Don't try to lose any digits, and we'll be back with more content for you guys very soon. So with that, I'll see you all later. All right.